So in this section of 365 Deep Dive, we're going to be talking about Copilot in Microsoft Excel.
Oh, let me mute
So as we
that.
begin our Excel journey, I think one of the things that it's important to point out is that it's going to work with table formatted data. That's where you're really going to get the best Excel experience out of it. So working with
Mhm.
table-based data inside of there. Much like we saw in Copilot for Word, in Copilot for Excel, we've got the Copilot panel that opens up along the side that allows us to interact with the data inside of the workbook. As far as the capabilities here, you're going to be able to do things like have it to identify insights. It's actually really good at doing that, breaking down insights in that table, and identifying trends that you might not immediately see just parsing through raw numbers. You're going to
Mhm.
be able to have it work with things like time frames. So, for example, one of the things in the sidebar you see over there is change from quarters to months. It can do things like that really, really quickly. Versus if you were to
Mhm.
try to do some of that, it would be much more timely or time consuming, rather, for you to be able to do that. And then once it starts interacting with that data, you're going to be able to do things like insert visualizations, charts of varying kinds. And I think what they've done a really good job of is working with the machine learning and analytics on the back end from years and years of experience working with Excel. And it knows intelligently what format to present that data back to you in a visualization. It knows how to help you conditionally format data because it's got all those years of learning on the back end, all those best practices. For years, I've referred to. There's a couple of
Mhm.
visualization guides that Microsoft has that are really good. I've presented those or shared those in trainings, and this is going to do a lot of that for you. And so you don't necessarily have to go and find that style guide to do that. And it's really going to help with that.
Mhm. Yeah, three things that I think is really cool about Copilot in Excel. And I have to admit, I am not an Excel power user. I don't use it very often. I kind of use it begrudgingly when I have to be honest. I know people, especially in my organization, would be like, "What? Excel isn't the most amazing tool you've ever used?" Because we're in a huge Excel shop. But three things that I think are great are one, getting visualizations that I may not know how to do because I don't use Excel that much, getting visualizations and getting pivot tables because I always have to like look up a YouTube video about how to make a pivot table because I do it so infrequently. So that would be like the first thing is doing things in Excel I don't know how to do. The second one is getting those visualizations or being able to do that conditional formatting. You can see right here where it's doing, I'm going to pause that. It's doing a color coding visualization that I could do that myself, but again, it's going to speed that up a little bit. And then that third thing, which is creating a model. Like, okay, I've got the data from what happened last year. What if I made this one little change? What might it look like next year? Being able to kind of like role play or like forecast and do things like that, I think is really, really powerful because you can see theoretically, what if I made this change or that change to my strategy? How does that affect the numbers for me? So I think that's a really cool ability right there to be able to kind of look into the future a little bit and kind of have that safe place to do some modeling, stuff like that. So those are my three favorite things in Excel. Andy, have you used Excel Copilot all that much before? Or are you kind of in the same boat as me?
I'll tell you one of the things that I have used it for, and this is really helpful for me, and that's working with formulas and expressions. It's actually really
Mm,
helpful for working with some of that. Full disclosure, I've used it with my fantasy baseball league and my fantasy football league. As we were getting toward the playoffs in the fantasy baseball league, that was helping me to identify trends over the last
nice.
3 to 6 weeks, which in some services is not always available. So I was able to
Is it
pull
giving
in.
you a leg up, you
Yeah,
think?
exactly. Like when like I play in ESPN leagues, and those leagues, it
Mm.
gives you a total score, but it doesn't break it down like in baseball of batting scoring versus like pitching statistics. It just puts it into one big bucket. And I needed to be able to break that up into two buckets. I wanted to know hitting wise how I was doing, and then pitching wise how I was doing compared to the rest of the league. So I was able to
Mm-hmm.
create an Excel workbook and import the standings, and the standings actually had all the information for hitters and for pitchers in one table. So I put that
Mm-hmm.
in one table, and then it had the total column, and then I created a second table side by side with that, and I inputted our scoring metrics, and then I was able to get Copilot to help me to based off of the scoring metrics create scoring that broke down hitting versus pitching. And then I was able to see, okay, hitting wise, how do I compare to some of the other teams, and pitching wise, how do I compare to some of the other teams? And then I was able to gain a little bit more insight into that. That was a fun experiment for me, and it was helping me to create and generate some of those formulas and expressions, which in this case we do I think we have 8 hitting categories and 7 or 8 pitching categories, and each one's weighed a little bit differently or weighted a little bit differently. It was able to help me to do that with it's kind of a nested formula, and so it got pretty complex. So it was able to help me figure that out and the syntax along with it, and that was really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so to kind of, break down what Excel Copilot or Copilot in Excel is kind of the branding that you're going with at this time. It's some ideas are breaking down sales by channel, asking questions about your data. What are the key trends? What are the things that you think are contributing to, an increase in sales, a decrease in sales, whatever. Stuff like that, reformatting the data into other visuals. That's something that has been helpful to me over the past couple months, here and there, creating charts that you may not know necessarily how to create, or kind of like a pain in the neck to create. You can ask it to create those for you. And you can also have it, tell you what is the best way to visualize this data. That's something I struggle with, is like, should this be a bar chart, or should this be a line graph or a pie chart? Copilot kind of help you with like the best way to visualize as well, which is pretty cool. The feature description for this, again, from learn.microsoft.com, is that you can query data in natural language. You don't have to, think in terms of formulas. You can reveal those like insights, correlations, do those what if scenarios, that kind of modeling that I talked about, generating models based on questions. What if I change this? What if I change that? How does it affect the data? And then again, create those visualizations, ask for recommendations, stuff like that. So, anything else? Let's see here. Fairy Geek Mother has a question that is, for those with licenses, will Copilot replace the current functionality like data and Excel, designer, stuff like that? From what I've seen, no, it doesn't replace any of those other features. My like PowerPoint designer, it kind of augments PowerPoint designer for me, right? I can do PowerPoint designer without Copilot, or I can ask Copilot to draft some slides for me, and it leverages designer as kind of its engine to create the layout. So I haven't seen anywhere where it's going to replace functionality. I've just seen where it's going to add to it.
Yeah, and I would second that. It doesn't take anything away from the application. It just gives you a new way to interact with those features and those functionalities using the
Mm-hmm.
Copilot tool and natural language. Sometimes it's easier for a user to say, "Hey, can you just highlight all of these things that are above this
Mm-hmm.
threshold in green?" versus trying to figure out how to do the formula. If you know how to do it, you can still go in there and do it. This just gives you a way to ask it to do that uh, without having to have all of that in-depth knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. All right, you ready to move on?
One, I think we got, hold on. There's one more down there. Let me just read that real quick.
This is, oh, Daryl. Yeah, Daryl, I agree. I don't have the skill to to fact check a lot of the numbers either, to understand, is like, is it hallucinating or not? Um, that's something where like this isn't going to replace people, right? Like, you need to have the skills to know if it is going wildly out of bounds or not. You need to understand the data. Like going back to Microsoft Word, draft me something about a topic. I need to understand that topic enough to know if it's giving me nonsense or not. You know, so like you still have to have these soft skills and understand what you're doing and not just fully trust it to do that. So that's a good thing to point out, Daryl, for sure.